episode of Ride Warriors Assemble. Now, we had this great idea that, Danny, you always talk to me about, hey, why don't we talk about our great trips that we have, as we traverse the country. You're actually even going international this year. And we don't really talk about trip reports on Uncut. So I said, well, why don't we make a whole new show and talk about trip reports? But I said, let's throw a different spin on it. Let's bring in some of our friends, some of our fans, some of the dignitaries of the coaster community, and let's have them talk about their experience as well. And thus was born Ride Warriors Assemble, our brand new uncut experience here at COASTER.net. Now, of course,
it remains to be seen if this will be a success or not, bringing in a bunch of weirdos to talk with us, because you and I are bad enough, but now we're gonna have a guest star each and every time we do this, so it's a little frightening.
It's a little frightening, but you already know me. I'm Andy Rabarchek. That's Danny Miller. But you may not know this third face here. Danny, why don't you introduce him, since you were the first one to actually meet this man?
That's right. Well, we got the Beard Man with us, and a lot of you guys know the Beard Man, and Adam Beard, better known. I think now. Hold on. The Beard Man name originated from In the Loop. Is that correct?
Yes, it actually did. It kind of carried over to Coaster Radio after that.
And now it's just when everyone sees Adam Beard at the park, they know him as the Beard Man. We won't say why. We'll let you guys figure it out. It's very, very difficult to figure out, but so anyways, we are talking about HoliWood Nights again. We've already got some great content from HoliWood Nights, but Andy, we thought it'd be a good idea to bring in someone else because you and I the last couple of years have given our thoughts. We did a live show 2 years ago. The year Thunderbird debuted, and then last year we kind of did the whole HoliWood Nights versus Coaster Mania debate, because you actually did both events last year. Yeah. There were some crazy folks who did both events this year. So this year we thought we'd put a little bit of a different spin on it and talk about the event as a whole, and some of the kind of quirky, weird things that Holiday World did this year that were different from previous years. So where do you guys want to start with all this?
Well, I think I'll start with talking about the event itself. It's always one of these events that we really love to attend. That I know you've always said that it's your favorite event of the year. I've done it this is my third time doing HoliWood Nights, and I've fallen in love with it as well. The highlight of the event is the ERT. Now, I think let's start with something that I haven't done a lot recently. Actually, I've never done it because 2 years ago, we did not do the water park ERT. Last year, I didn't actually attend on Friday because I went to Coaster Mania, like you said. So this is actually the first year that I actually did the water park ERT mainly of Wildebeest and Mammoth. And it's been a few years since I've been in Splash and Safari. And let me say, I was really, really impressed again. I fell in love with Wildebeest, whereas before I kind of liked Mammoth a lot more. But I think Wildebeest was the far superior ride this time. What were your thoughts on the water coasters?
Well, I'll start here and then turn it over to Adam, because the last 2 years we were together in our group when we did both of these. Last year it was the first time I got to ride both Wildebeest and Mammoth, and I was super impressed with both. And I had said from that point forward, if more water parks had these pro slide water coasters, I would probably go to water parks. I just don't go to water parks. I'm not a water park guy. I'd rather be on the coasters. I'd rather stay dry and not be in the soup, as some people like to say. But these are two rides that I absolutely love. Now, last year, I thought, it's funny that you say that you fell back in love with Wildebeest this year, because I actually thought Mammoth was the better one this year, was the better slide this year, but last year I thought Wildebeest was far superior. I thought Mammoth had an extra gear this year that it didn't have last year, but Wildebeest and Mammoth are just absolutely phenomenal attractions, and I really wish that more parks could put the money into these pro slide water coasters because they are absolutely phenomenal. Adam, what are your thoughts?
I think they're both fantastic rides, really some of the best rides you can go on. Definitely my favorite water rides I've been on. I personally prefer Mammoth just a little bit. I think it's a little bit more comfortable with the boats, and I think the unpredictability of the fact that you can spin a little bit and you can experience parts of the ride backwards and parts of the ride sideways. Definitely, they're two completely different rides, I think. I think Wildebeest is a lot more agile and a lot more kind of about speed and airtime, whereas Mammoth is a little bit of more of a mixed experience. But both are fantastic water rides for sure.
Now,
and that water on Mammoth is ice cold. So we always said. I remember both years we did Mammoth first because we knew the water was much colder. Because Andy, you had said that. A lot of other people said that because they run off different pumps. And Mammoth is definitely the coldest water in the water park, and most say that Wildebeest is some of the warmest water. So we always like to do the cold one first, so it's a bit less shocking when you go over to Wildebeest. Adam, you'll probably remember we ran into some of our friends, the Breckners, they had done Wildebeest first, and they were getting off Wildebeest going over to Mammoth when we got to Wildebeest, and they were talking about how cold the water was at Wildebeest, and we were like, well, you're in for a treat over at Mammoth. You guys are going to be ice pops by the time you're done. Yeah. But everyone I know had a fantastic time on Friday, and it was nice and warm. Andy, you and I didn't do the water park 2 years ago because it was actually on the chilly side on that first Friday night. And the sun was out. The sun was hot. Andy, you and I and Dason and Sue had gone to Indiana Beach, so we were, hot from sitting in the car and really wanted to kind of just let loose and refresh ourselves. So it was kind of the perfect storm this year to do the water park ERT. And the food. Can we get into that in a minute? Well, the food here. Go ahead.
Before we talk about the food, I thought it was interesting about Wildebeest, the amount of airtime I got on that water coaster this year. We did not have a full boat. It was Dason sat in the front, I sat in the back, and then we flip-flop places. So we didn't have a full boat. And I'll tell you what, we were coming off that track at different points, and it was crazy. Now, I don't know if when you have a full boat, if that's a little bit different experience, because
I think Wildebeest is better when you have a lighter boat, because we rode with, I think, Adam, I think it was you, myself, and Sue the first time, and then the second time we actually had a single rider get put with us, and I thought the first ride was better. I personally like the back of the little torpedo, and what Mammoth, it doesn't really matter, right, because you've got the round boat and you're always spinning, which is an awesome part of the re-rideability of Mammoth. Me being a contact lens wearer, I don't like sitting in the front of Wildebeest because you tend to get a lot of the spray. And that's, if you're a contact lens wearer, you know that if you get water in your eyes, it can flood your eyes and your contacts fall out. So I always like sitting in the back of Wildebeest. And there is, I think it's like the third drop on Wildebeest. You come up over top of the hill, you do like a right-hand turn, not quite a 180, and then there's a very steep drop into a tunnel, which I think is probably the best moment maybe on either slide. But in the back of Wildebeest, when you maybe only have 2 or 3 people, I think that is, quite frankly, one of the scariest moments on any attraction, any park ever, because it's not a roller coaster. You don't have a harness and a seatbelt and all this stuff. You are literally just hanging on to the little, nylon straps on the side of this boat, and you are off the boat. The boat is off the slide, and then you come crashing down. So, that's kind of the underestimated, or I guess maybe the underappreciated part of these slides, is the fact that you're not in a roller coaster car. You're not strapped down with a seatbelt and a harness. There are times on both of these where your boat goes over the hill and the boat is off the slide and you are off the boat, and it feels like you could just let go and you're stuck. You're stuck going wherever you want to go. But I think that's part of what makes these things so thrilling.
And the other strange thing I found, I remembered, was that at the end of Mammoth, how much water is in your boat as you're sitting there.
Just a tsunami wave that comes over when you crash into the pool.
And I made the joke of, man, I feel like I'm on Shoot the Rapids. There's so much water in this boat.
Oh, man. Adam, you had something to add there.
Yeah, so both times we rode wildebeest, or at least this year and last year, I sat in the front. Mm-hmm. And it's scary in the front, like especially that one drop you were talking about, because where that tunnel is, where the top of that tunnel is acts as a foot chopper if you're in the front because your feet are hanging off the front of the boat. And so there were times when I thought I was going to hit my feet on something.
You were going to do a backflip over the rest of the boat.
Oh man. So definitely the water coasters are really cool there. Now, the other aspect of HoliWood Nights that everyone always loves is the food. And this year,
oh my God!
This year they went all out, especially with the theme. If you don't know what the theme was Jurassic Park. Danny, you got the T-shirt there. With
Safari Sam replacing the T-Rex there.
So absolutely. So we had Jurassic Park music playing throughout the entire event, and the food. We're kind of themed to the dinosaurs, where you had pterodactyl wings, some good old chicken wings in different flavors that were really good. They also had these little mini chocolate like pastries that had orange and red icing on the top of them that made it look like a volcano. And then they had a number of different herbosauruses, or as I like to call them, vegisauruses from the movie, if you remember that line.
And I think the two signature things, I had some of the chicken wings, but I think, Adam, you had this as well, was a pulled pork and cheese mashed potato parfait. So this was like a plastic cup, maybe about this large. If you've ever had it when you were a kid, if you had like the cup of dirt dessert at like elementary school, or sometimes they even had it if you were older. They had a larger version of that as like a dessert, where they had like the Oreo cookies and the chocolate pudding. They had that in there, but then they also had like a similar dish where it was mashed potatoes in the bottom. Then they had pulled pork mixed in with the mashed potatoes, and then they had shredded cheese on top. And it was, parfait style, pulled pork, cheese, and mashed potatoes. And that was absolutely phenomenal. I would dare to say that might be the best dish served at that Friday night hors d'oeuvre food session in the last 3 years since Andy, you and I have been doing this. I remember they had some really good wings and peanut brittle.
Yes,
the first year 3 years ago. Last year it was more of like, I think, just chicken wings. I think they had like some meatballs last year as well. But this year I thought was probably the best in terms of the food offering. So much so that later on that night, when they had the pizza and fudge and everything, I didn't really have much of anything up there because I had eaten so much. I had eaten so much because, the pizza and fudge is always kind of there on the Friday night. So you kind of want to really take in what they have at that first food session at the water park. And I thought they just did a dynamite job this year.
Yeah, I think it's funny that we call it hors d'oeuvres whenever it's a meal.
Yeah, I think that's what they put it on the sheet as. But I know Sue and I had breakfast at the hotel before we left on Friday morning, because we flew into Chicago Thursday night and then stayed halfway between Chicago and Indiana Beach. So we had breakfast at the hotel and then just had like a bag of pretzels and whatnot on the way down to Holiday World, because we knew that we were going to be stuffing our faces Friday night, whether it was between one of those food sessions or between both of them. So the food's always awesome, but you're right, it really is like a full meal, 2 full meals maybe even.
Yeah, and the food at HoliWood Nights is always a highlight, for everything. So you talked about the pizza and the fudge. Then the next day they had an amazing nacho bar. After the walk back that we'll talk about, they have 2 different walk backs. We'll talk about both of them momentarily. But I also like the main dinner on Saturday night as well. Their fried chicken is really outstanding. And they also had pulled pork this year, which was pretty good. But I think that what makes that pulled pork even better is they have a special smokehouse Holiday World
the
barbecue
sauce.
which I've bought bottles of before and have some in my refrigerator right now, and it is outstanding, that barbecue sauce. It's one of the best barbecue sauces in the world, and trust me, I've sampled a lot of them. So, overall,
you and I are barbecue sauce connoisseurs of sorts.
Yeah, maybe we need to start a new Facebook group. I don't think we have enough Facebook groups out there yet.
The barbecue sauce connoisseurs. They can be a partner to all the other roller coaster groups that are going on.
Oh my goodness. So I think let's move on to the next topic, which I think is the one thing that HoliWood Nights is known for is having these daytime activities. Where you get to have these walkbacks of their major coasters. In the past, it's mostly been Voyage and Thunderbird, but this year they've added onto a Legend walkback and a Raven walkback, and they haven't done the Raven walkback for years, way before I ever started going. They used to do it way back when, but they brought it back this year. Still, Raven's still a very difficult ride to get pictures of and video of. I think that one's so buried in the forest, it is nearly impossible to get stuff of that. You had a really good observation, though. Was it about Raven or Legend, though, Danny, about the elevation change? I can't remember.
Yeah, I think, Adam, you and I spent a lot of time during the walk back, getting photos, and, we were in pretty close proximity. And then, Andy, you were a little farther back in the group. But, Adam, you and I commented very quickly about how the turnover, there's a little walkway that goes between Lake Rudolph and then kind of the forest, woodsy area where the second half of Raven takes place. And if you're kind of back farther and you're facing the majority of Raven, off to your right you see Lake Rudolph, and you can see the campground, and you see the turn over Lake Rudolph that occurs basically after Raven's second drop. It does the turn over Lake Rudolph and then kind of does the 180. And you see that, and that's basically at ground level because you're standing on the ground, and then you have the lake, and the turn goes down basically to almost to water level there. But then you look off to the left, and you go down, I would say it's got to be like a 30-foot ravine, and then you see Raven coming up out of its fifth drop, which is the highlight moment of Raven, kind of up into a right-hand bank turn, and then it goes down even more into sort of the last few turns. And if you look behind me back here, right up here, this is actually actually hung in the Custom Coasters construction trailer. It's actually the footer layout for Raven. So the last several turns of Raven occur down in this ravine, and I think the first drop of Raven is something like 75 feet or so. It's not very big by modern standards, but if you go from the top of the lift hill to the lowest point of the ride, which is right before the end of the ride where you turn up into the brakes, I think it's something like 120 foot elevation change. And this walk back was the first time that I had actually visually been able to kind of comprehend the difference in height, because where the turn over Lake Rudolph has to be close to 30 to 40 feet above the lowest point of the ride. So when you ride this ride and you ask yourself, how in the hell does this ride have so much speed in the second half? Well, that's why. And Adam, you and I had comments on that. It was really, really cool to see that.
Yeah, it was. It's another coaster that has a huge elevation change is Boulder Dash here.
Well, yeah, it's that same sort of thing. Yeah, it's the same sort of thing. How you get the terrain ride.
The reason why the ride works the way it does is because you have that second big drop, which is maybe probably the same size as the first drop. But you already have the speed from the rest of the course going over that drop that gives you all the speed towards the end of the ride, which is really cool. The other interesting thing I thought that I noticed was the fact that when you're on the ride, you really feel like you're in the woods. But if you walk around the perimeter of the ride, there's parts of the ride that actually, to the right of it is trees, and to the left of it is actually this lake, which you don't really notice on the ride typically. So I thought that was
Especially
interesting
at
how
night.
kind of exposed some parts of the ride are, even though it seems like it's actually really kind of buried back in the woods.
Well, and the other thing that I noticed, I think you and I noticed right away, is at the bottom of the first drop of Raven, you've got a tunnel. And what I never realized from riding the ride, and you still don't notice from riding the ride, but when you walk back, the bottom of the first drop is actually not flat. Most people would think that tunnel over the first drop, it's flat with land, but when you go down the drop, the tunnel itself is actually on a slight decline. So you are still picking up speed as you're going through the tunnel because it's on a slight decline, but because it's so much shallower than the first drop, and it's kind of an illusion of sorts that makes you think that you are flat and just going along a flat section of track when you're actually still picking up speed. And I think that's part of the genius design of Raven is the way it uses the terrain like that, because it is on a downslope there where that tunnel is. So it's constant trickery into constantly picking up speed. We always talk about how rides tend to lose their speed as they go throughout the course. The best rides are the ones that maintain their speed. Well, the best rides are the ones that maintain their speed or even get faster, or the elements are built in such a way that the ride seems to get well, here we go. It seems to get faster as the ride goes on. I think Raven, we'll talk about this maybe with Voyage in particular as well, but I think Raven is a great example of making a ride go faster and faster and faster, or making it seem like it's going faster and faster and faster throughout the entire ride.
Yeah, and then the next part of that tour was the actual Legend viewing area, and I thought it was really cool because, once again, Legend is a very difficult ride to photograph, to take video of, because you're so far away from where everything actually happens. So we actually got to walk right there in the middle of it, where between, the lift hill and that first drop, walk right under that. And I thought that was a really cool area. I really did. I like how, because Legend has that really unique architecture where you have those beams that come to the center point and then go straight down along the side of the structure. And I've always thought that that's a really cool, people complain about that all the time too, that they think it's ugly. I think it's really cool and unique. And being there in the middle, no, you don't think so? I like it even more.
Well, I mean, Legend. When you look at how well wooded all of Legend is, I mean, Adam, you made the point that Raven kind of has some exposed parts that you don't really notice while you're on the ride, but because you're kind of banked off to the right, so you don't really get to see off to the left on that one part of the ride. I know what the part of the ride you're talking about, but Legend is hidden in the woods that much more, and especially being able to walk directly under the lift hill and being able to walk right up to the first drop of Legend. That lift hill and the first drop is just a total work of art when you look. It really is, and the people who think that's ugly, I don't understand it. I think it is an awesome piece of roller coaster architecture, really. I mean, it really is a work of art, the way that they've kind of integrated all of these rides into the landscape. But, it was really, really fantastic.
Yeah, I think so too. Now, I did not get a chance to go on the second walk back of Voyage and Thunderbird, just because it got too hot for me and I wanted to go back to the hotel. Yeah, I'm a big girl. Don't question me. I know. But what? So Adam,
well, that's gonna be reinforced by a topic you bring up in a little bit. So why don't
Well, so Adam, what were some of your thoughts of the Voyage and Thunderbird walk back?
I did that walk back last year. So this is my. I think the really cool part of that walk back is sort of the vantage points that you can take pictures from, especially because you walk right under and right by where the two rides interact with each other. Mm-hmm. And especially with Thunderbird, you can actually stand underneath, underneath the 0-0 and take pictures above your head of people flying over you. And I think it also kind of shows you really how far back Voyage goes. Unfortunately, we didn't get to go all the way back to the Spaghetti Bowl. I was kind of hoping that maybe we could go that far back. But it's just really cool to be able to stand right next to the rides as they run and get some really fantastic pictures of them.
Yeah, I mean, the Voyage Thunderbird walk back is always interesting, and, people have been saying to me, it's like, well, didn't you do that one last year? Like, are you gonna really go on that again? And I was like, yeah, because the one time I don't go on it is gonna be the time they take you back to the mid-course or they take you back to the Spaghetti Bowl. But I mean, that never fails to be one of the most impressive walkbacks. And again, we talked about it with Raven, and I've made this point many times before. But when you go on this walk back, you start basically underneath the lift hill of Voyage, and you go essentially to where the fourth hill is, which is the small Trickery Hill. You've got the first drop, then you've got two big hills, then you've got a small hill with a right-hand kink, and then you've got the fifth hill, which is sort of the last straight part of that ride before you get into the Spaghetti Bowl. And the entire time where you go from where the Voyage lift hill is all the way back to where the Thunderbird fly-through barn and barrel roll is, which is essentially where the tour ends, you are going uphill the entire time. And this is where I'm going to make a point about Voyage that we made with Legend about using the terrain to almost trick people into think that they're going faster than they are, or to help a ride maintain its speed or even pick up speed. So what you don't realize the first time you ride Voyage, and maybe not until you do a walk back like this, is where the turnaround and where the Spaghetti Bowl and where the mid-course brake run of Voyage are is about 80 feet above station height. And when you think about that, it sort of makes sense, because when you're on the ride, at least in the daytime, and you're going through the Spaghetti Bowl, you're so close to the ground, and you have all this speed because you've gone over these big hills, and you have all this momentum from the first drop, and you're just twisting and turning, and it's so relentless in the Spaghetti Bowl. And then you come up to the mid-course, and you go through the mid-course, and you're thinking, well, hold it, we're only 20 feet off the ground, and we're not going that fast. I mean, you're still going maybe, 20 miles per hour, let's say. But you're not that far off the ground. So then how in the hell does this ride have all the speed it does for the second half? Well, it's because you've got that 80-foot difference, because even though you're going down, you have the triple down, so you've got maybe like 80 feet right there, but then you have all these small airtime hills and these crossover hills and the twists and turns and the 90-degree turns and everything in the second half. And because you're constantly going downhill, because you have to get back down that 80 feet that you've kind of taken away, you have to make up that 80-foot height difference. So you're constantly picking up speed, which is the genius part of how this ride was designed, because you may actually get faster as the ride goes on. Certainly from the mid-course to the end of the ride, you're going faster. But it feels like you get faster and faster and faster as the ride goes on, because the ride progressively gets more intense. You start off with these two really big floater airtime hills where, as long as the lap bar isn't stapled against your lap, you are standing up in the train. That's how good the airtime is. So they have these two big hills. Then you have this third hill, or fourth hill, I guess it is, if you include the lift hill, where you think you're going to have another big hill. And it's a really tiny speed hill with a right-hand kink in it. So you come flying out of your seat, and then you get thrown to the left side of the car. So then you're like, oh, here's the Spaghetti Bowl. Not so fast. Then you get another big floater airtime hill with tunnels on either end, and then you do the crossover hill into the Spaghetti Bowl. And this is really intense, right? Then you've got the mid-course, where it's like you get 3 seconds to hold your breath, and then you're in the triple down, and then you get into what I like to call the third half of Voyage, because that's how long the ride actually is. It really is 3 halves of a coaster put together. And these walkbacks are a great opportunity to really appreciate how these rides were designed and what makes them so unique, because there's very few examples where using the natural terrain can actually assist a ride in such a way. Rides like Lightning Rod use the terrain to create the airtime hills, but at the end of the day, and even Boulder Dash to a point, but at the end of the day, these rides use the terrain not only just to create the elements, but to make the ride seem like it's doing something that it can't physically do.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, the Voyage is just that special of a ride that just is crazy throughout the whole thing. But we've talked a lot about Voyage on these shows. But Adam, you had a very special experience that you got to do on Legend called the Water Cup Challenge. Can you explain what that was about?
Yes. Okay, so basically the Water Cup Challenge is actually something that the employees of Holiday World have done in the past. They have what they call the HoliOlympics, where they have all these kind of games and things that they use as kind of team building. And this year they've decided to actually bring that to the HoliWood Nights. Basically, all it is, you get a little paper cup, about this big, and they tell you can fill it with as much or as little water as you want. And basically, you ride the ride with this cup of water. And when you come back, we had teams of 4. And so everybody pours the water that they have left into basically a pitcher that has measurements on the side. And basically the team with the most water at the end of the ride won the Water Cup Challenge. And so, first of all, you have to realize that Legend is a very, very intense ride, just to even ride with your hands up as it is without holding anything. And then you have to think that you have a paper cup, which is, the flimsiest of cup materials possible. And half the challenge is not squeezing the cup, because, as soon as you squeeze the cup, all the water's going to come out, which is basically like, for me, when I did it, as soon as I got to the bottom of the first drop, all my water's gone. Because, I kind of held it like this. I held my hand over the top of it, and I held the bottom of it. But the forces of the ride, I push up on the cup, and all the water's gone. Now, supposedly what the secret to this challenge is if you kind of hold the cup to your face, and you just hold it there like this throughout the entire ride. Supposedly that's the secret.
Oh, God.
And that way some of the water can like splash into your mouth, and you can just spit it back into the cup, which I feel like is probably a choking hazard. But that's basically what it is. You ride the Legend with a cup of water, and you try as hard as you can to not let any of the water come out of that cup. And then the other part of it too is you don't have to fill your cup up all the way. So I guess there's some strategy in terms of how much water you put in your cups to begin with too.
Well, those were some of the things that I was going to ask, because, we had been signed up for it just in case we were going to do it. We did not participate in it. We had actually taken the time to ride the Gobbler Getaway a few times with a different group of folks. And those were some of the questions I was going to have. Like, number one, can you put your hand over top of it? Or can you do that? Or, because in my mind... And then, like, how much are you going to start with, and what kind of cup was it? That's what I wanted to know. A group of friends of ours, I know, Brian Wackler and his wife Julie, their group was actually the winners of this. And I remember seeing, I think it was on the HoliWood Nights Facebook page, someone said, who won the Water Cup Challenge, like a day or two later, and someone posted a selfie of them with their shirt all wet, and they said, well, it wasn't me. So I thought that was kind of funny. But when you think about it, Legend is probably the most difficult of the 3 rides to do it on, because Raven is a shorter ride, so there's maybe less opportunity, and Voyage is the longest and arguably the most intense of the 3. But the thing with Voyage is very airtime centric, with some laterals thrown in and some of the high bank turns. But if you're thinking about keeping water inside of a cup, I would think Legend might actually be the most difficult, because Legend is probably mostly lateral forces and a lot of side to side, back and forth. And it also has some trick airtime thrown in there, whereas Voyage, it's just a lot of airtime, and you kind of know where those spots are, whereas Legend is maybe a little bit more surprising, and the quickness of those surprises is maybe a little bit more. So Legend would seem to me like it might be the most difficult to do this in. Now, did you see people coming off with absolutely no water left, and they like had water all over their shirts? Like, was that what most of these people were doing?
Yeah, pretty much. Part of our strategy, I ran it with Chris, part of our strategy was to sit in the front seat to hopefully avoid having more water on us than we would if we were sitting further back.
If you're in the back seat, you're probably taking a bath.
Our team back, and we had about this much water left between the four of us. Yeah. And it was one of those things where I kind of wish that I could practice for it, like get a couple rides on it with the water to try different things. But there were some people that they came back and their cup was completely full. And I was just blown away. I was like, how did you do this? And so, apparently there are ways. I think the only real rule was you can cover your cup with a body part, but that's it. Like that was like the only thing that you can't. Yeah, you can cover the cup with a body part, and that was pretty. So, much
like, if you stole a lid or something from like a restaurant or whatever, because do they even have lids for the free soft drinks? I don't even know if they do. So you couldn't like take a lid from somewhere and put the lid on top. Is basically what they were trying to say. You could cover it with a body part. That's like oddly vague. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and, that allows for people like they can, but basically, like I said, supposedly the secret to it is you press it against your face, which I think would still be.
That seems like it would hurt. I don't know how. Like, we're not talking about daytime legend here where you can see everything. We're talking about nighttime legend where you have no clue what's going on after the first drop, pretty much.
And could you even imagine if they did that 2 years ago when Legend was really good? Like.
Well, when Legend had the crazy when it had the crazy CCI original finale that just banged you against the side of the train 4 times in a row.
I'll be honest with you. I think the skill there would be coming back with a cup, not just water in a cup, because I would think
you would, if all 4 people come back with their cups still intact. I think that's probably where. Well, maybe that was the whole goal of this. It's like we're going to retrack Legend and smooth out the 4 corners of death so that we can actually do this, because it's just way too much to do it on any of them right now.
So
that's funny.
I think the last thing I want to do here tonight is, every year it seems at HoliWood Nights that one ride kind of takes the cake amongst others. I can remember back 2 years ago. The Legend was running insane. That's when we came up with the whole, keep going. This damn ride's trying to kill me. All that great stuff happened on Legend 2 years ago. Last year for me, being that Thunderbird was open for the first time, I sat on Thunderbird for like 2 hours, during ERT on Saturday night. So, for me, last year is kind of Thunderbird. This year though, I think for me, I think it was Raven that was my number one ride of the night, where I thought Raven was running exceptionally good, was running out of control. And I don't know what it was. It was just Raven I felt was like really, really good this year. Did you guys have a favorite ride?
Adam?
I thought all 3 of the wood coasters were running better, personally, than they did last year. Voyage was definitely smoother. They definitely touched up a lot of spots. To the point to where it was actually much easier to re-ride. Not that we wouldn't re-ride it if it was hard to re-ride, but I thought Voyage was smoother. Raven was definitely running much better and much smoother as well. And Dan, you and I agreed that Legend was running faster this year than it did last year.
Yeah, I think the point I made is, I know, Adam, you do this. I don't know if you do this, Andy, but I like to keep track of how many times I ride each thing. And 2 years ago, Andy, you and I think, rode Thunderbird the most because it was the new ride. We rode it a lot during the day, and that's where we started. I think you and I actually went to Thunderbird on 2 different occasions 2 years ago on each night. We actually made like 4 different visits during ERT, whereas now it seems like that's where everyone kind of starts both nights. Or Friday night, we didn't even make it up to Thunderbird on Friday night because we wanted to do the wood coasters, we wanted to do the auction, which was at the other end of the park. We just didn't really have time to make our way back to Thunderbird, especially with the water park eating up the first part of the night. Saturday night, night we went back to Thunderbird to start and basically waited till it got completely dark and then kind of made our, said our farewells. I think I only rode Thunderbird 5 times over the course of the entire weekend, because most people start with Thunderbird on Saturday because they don't want to have to walk all the way back up that hill later after having ridden some of the wood coasters, which are very physically tiring, riding these wood coasters. Last year, Raven, a lot of people commented that Raven was a little bit rough towards the end. Raven was running somewhat mean, I think is the way I would describe it. It had a little bit of a shake to it, not necessarily in a bad way, but you could tell that they, were getting ready to do some work. They retracked a lot of the second half of Raven, and it was noticeably smoother, not in a bad way. Sometimes when you smooth out a wood coaster, as Andy will tell you, it's not always necessarily a good thing. But Raven, I thought they did the right amount of retracking to it. Raven was definitely running very, very well. Voyage, we talk about Voyage all the time. Voyage, even on its bad days, Voyage is still probably one of, if not the best roller coaster on Earth. And I think the three of us kind of, for the most part, agree with that statement. Legend, I did notice, had a little bit extra oomph to it this year. That when you retrack a wood coaster, it tends to maybe take a little bit to really kind of find its groove. And I think maybe last year, Andy, you've been very public about saying you were not a huge fan of the work done to the finale of Legend. I've always said I don't think it's better. I don't think it's worse. I think it's different. The finale, the Four Corners of Death, if you will, have more airtime. The Four Corners of Death never had airtime. Now they have some of that GCI airtime. Some of the lateral forces have been reduced. Last year, the Four Corners of Death didn't have very much lateral force at all, and this year I thought that was very, very different. I thought that there was pretty good lateral force on all the turns, and the double down was still a nice surprise, especially when you're not used to that being there still. I thought there was more airtime. I thought the lateral forces were increased and better fit in line with what Legend is all about. And Andy, I think having ridden with me in the back row at night towards the end of the event, you finally kind of warmed up to it a little bit and agreed with me that the Helix is still what it used to be. Yeah. Last year you did not think that. This year you did sort of come around, at least on the Helix, that the Helix was as good as it has been in past years and is appropriate of the keep going comment. And I think I remember you uttering at one point, "Oh my God, when does this Helix end?" At one point. Yeah. So I was happy to see you come around a little bit. It goes on forever. Personally, I think it's much better than the Helix on the Beast. I think that's the best double helix in the industry.
Not even close. The Beast is nothing. That's boring. But speaking of falling asleep on a lift hill, I almost...
Oh, here we go.
I would like to thank all the people on Facebook, not so much the people at HoliWood Nights, because no one seemed to care there. They seem to care more about other things than my safety.
No, nobody cared.
But I'd like to thank all the people on Facebook for their well wishes. As some of you know, I had a very harrowing experience on the Voyage. I was stuck on the lift hill. I almost died. I don't know how I survived the night.
You walked 4 steps when you got evacuated because you were in the back seat at the base of the lift hill. I walked all the way up and all the way down on Saturday morning, and I had to get up early. You went back to the hotel and rested during the middle of the day. Well, I don't even want to hear you talk about this being some sort of awful experience.
See, I understand your confusion because, you forget that, my home park technically is Six Flags Great America. And everywhere in Six Flags Great America, they say danger, high voltage on these roller coasters. That you can't cross that fence because there's high voltage somewhere. I don't know where. But Holiday World does not have those signs, nor does any other park. So when I had to step down,
let me ask you. Let me ask you, does wood conduct electricity?
I don't know because I had to step down. I had to step down on the track, though. So there were points where I had to step on the metal track, and one would assume that if Great America thinks there's high voltage...
electricity for the rails?
I don't know. Why does Great America have high voltage signs on all their fences? I don't know. But this is where I come from, so I didn't know what to expect. I could have died that evening, Danny Miller. Nobody seemed to care.
You could not have died. You could not have died. I'll tell you what. I got evacuated. On Gobbler Getaway during the day on Saturday. We stopped one station short of the actual exit when the ride broke down. They had to come open up our lap bars, and we had to walk an extra 3 feet to get out of that. This is what you sound like right now.
A very dangerous situation there as well. I agree. And anytime, the whole rest of the evening, I was waiting for the media choppers to get there. I was waiting for the interviews about how harrowing of an experience it was. And then when I would tell my friends about it, you know what their first response was? Well, is the ride back open? Not, how are you doing? Are you okay? Oh my God, you survived.
I want to know if the ride's back open. I don't care that you got evacuated. I want to go ride the damn thing.
My friends worried about the coaster and when it was going to open. Oh my God, a harrowing experience.
I had the sunride on Voyage on Saturday night. I wanted to make sure the damn thing was going to be running.
All my friends that evening.
10:30 at night, ERT ends at midnight. I want to make sure the thing's running at the end of the night. Come on.
At least
it's not HoliWood Nights without ending on the Voyage. Come on.
Anyway, at least the people on Facebook understood my plight. So they thank you for the well wishes.
Stop it.
So, the other thing I want to say is I do want to thank all the great people that came out and said hello to us, that they love the show Uncut. That they absolutely love Uncut. That seemed to be the overwhelming response, is how great of a show Uncut is.
Yes, we had several folks throughout both evenings, but particular Sunday during dinner and before ERT, and even during ERT, we had several folks come up to us and say, "Hey, hey Dan, when we were together and separate, someone was getting in the car of the Voyage and said, "You're Danny from COASTER-net. I love COASTER-net Uncut." And then we had someone come up to us just before ERT and actually asked to take a photograph with the two of us and said, "Hey, Danny, Andy, I'm a big show of Uncut." And we had people come up and not ask for photos. I mean, we had people that we talked to for 5 or 10 minutes about different things, and they didn't want to take photos. But there was one person in particular that was not shy at all, gave their camera to someone and said, "Hey, can you take a picture of me with Andy and Danny, because I love COASTER-net Uncut." So it's really seriously though, it is really nice to see that we actually have fans and people that like the show here, and there are people that are watching this crazy nonsense that we do every week here. So we do appreciate everyone who watches, and also when you're out at the parks and you see us, come say hello, and we'll go for a ride on Voyage or Thunderbird or whatever park we're at. We'll grab a ride and talk for a few minutes. We like doing that. That's why we do this, right? We like talking about it. So it was really nice to see a lot of different people, both new and old friends, that we see every year at the event, and hopefully first timers that are now repeat visitors to the event. It is really nice, because that's the other part of this whole thing is, we have the great food and we have the tours, and we talk about how great the Holiday World customer service is, and it's always top notch and second to none, and the ERT is always fantastic, but just as important is the social aspect of it. You see so many people that you get to know year after year from different events in HoliWood Nights. I always call it the best weekend of the coaster season, and I still stand by that statement after this year's again. It really is the best possible time you can have at an amusement park.
Any final thoughts, Adam, from you as we wrap it up here? Any final thoughts, final ruminations?
Sure. You guys, I know you guys like to talk a lot about kind of the best ride that you've ever had on a coaster, just in general. I think for those of you who haven't been to HoliWood Nights, or who are thinking about going to HoliWood Nights, I think it's kind of safe to say that any ride on any one of those coasters during HoliWood Nights could easily be the best ride you've ever had on a coaster. And it's basically just 2 nights full of the best rides you will ever have on a coaster.
7 hours of ERT.
But more importantly than that, it's with all your friends from the community. It's with the great service that the park gives you and the great food and everything else. And don't underestimate the water coasters too, because those are also fantastic as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's a great point there. If you're not, people who've been watching the show for a long time know that Andy and I are not water park people. We very, very rarely ever step foot in water parks. Holiday World is the exception to that rule. During the day we don't really go because the lines are super long, and if we're going to wait in a line, we'd rather wait and ride one of the coasters. But if you're not a water park person, you're not a water ride person, Wildebeest and Mammoth are 2 of them to try and to give a chance. Even if you're not there for HoliWood Nights, those are 2 to give a try because they are very, very fun. So that's a great point to bring up there. I already said most of what I wanted to say. It was just an all-around good time. The customer service is always second to none from Holiday World. The rides are always top-notch. They always make sure that they're running as good as they possibly can. And we talked about, we've got some other videos up already. Andy, you got to do the Gobbler Getaway walk back. I got to do the Voyage Lift walk with my friend Chris. I won the Zen Ride auction, and we got to do a Ride of Remembrance for Elaine Jackson, who passed away over the winter. A big group of us that all knew her very well and were very close to her. So, that was very moving and very emotional for all of us. And, things like that wouldn't be able to take place at just any old amusement park. I think it all comes back to the customer service of Holiday World, the welcoming that Holiday World offers to folks, and just the lengths they go to each and every year to make this worthy of being called the best weekend of the theme park season.
Absolutely. Thank you once again for joining us here on this very first episode of Ride Warriors Assemble. I'm, of course, Andrew Barczyk from Chicago, Illinois.
I'm Adam Beard from Center Reach, New York.
And I'm Danny Miller from Binghamton, New York.
And as always, ride on, Ride Warriors.
See you guys.